Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app. Apple, we recommend Apple Podcasts, Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Check out Off the Floor. That's where the conversation on the Heat never stops. 10 different channels, including a draft channel and a transaction channel. Both of those things are relevant to this particular episode. Also, you get host updates. And again, you can find fellow Heat fans. You don't have to get the same five tweets, same five tweeters all day long. So check it out. Off the Floor, $2.99 per month. Link is right here in the description of the podcast feed and the YouTube channel. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Our friend Nelson, his family, his team. If you work in a medical office or a hospital, reach out to them. Great people, 561-891-9620. That's 561-891-9620. It's Mobile C-Arm Staffing Services. What do? They bring the x-ray equipment and the staffing right to your office. So come check them out at c-armandstaffing.com, c-armandstaffing.com, or again, reach out to Nelson directly at 561-891-9620. And if I go too fast, because I always do on this, reach out to me at the Five Reasons Sports Twitter account, and I will give you their information directly. And now, today's episode.
Down to Biscayne. Yikes. Five on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all banned. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust. It's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. I got Greg Sylvander. You can find him at Greg Sylvander. And for the second time, bringing him back after a successful first voyage here, Yossi Gozlan. You can find his YouTube work and everything that he does at his Twitter feed. Again, it's exactly the same as his name. We like that. Yossi Gozlan, Yossii Gozlan. And what we're going to do today, we're going to take a Heat focus with this, as we typically do. Obviously, there's a lot of transaction stuff that's out there today. Some reports that the Cleveland feels pretty good about re-signing Donovan Mitchell. So maybe we won't get to the 38 episodes that we got to with Dame Lillard, but maybe we can consider this the third one in a series. But we will talk about other things. So I'll start here with you, Yossi, and let's put this in a macro context. How would you grade the Heat's current cap situation, cap and tax?
So I did a lot of research just this week about it, and even with all these new hiccups with the CBA, the second apron stuff, which I'm sure when the Heat were getting all these contracts with Bam and Jimmy's extension over the years and Duncan's contract, obviously they had no idea this stuff was coming. I'm sure that this was a curveball and to some degree, but even then they are, I think they're still in really good shape, at least for the next 2 years for sure. Once Bam is ready to get his next contract, which, presumably would be in the max range, and a max by then is going to be like 50 million plus a year. Okay, then things start to get a little more complicated. Jimmy still wants more money, but we'll see what happens then. And they'll presumably want to either add a third star or maybe replace Jimmy with another star. But even with all this other money they have with Tyler Hero and Terry Rozier, Duncan Robinson, like I mentioned, I think they're still in pretty good shape. I guess the biggest thing is, one, are they able to consolidate some of it for another max player, or just maybe just a better backcourt player? It doesn't necessarily need to be an all-star. Or I think more pressing, they probably need unless like Jovic really becomes that guy, they probably need another good front court player.
Well, Greg, I'll let you jump in on this.
Yeah, for sure. Yossi, thanks for coming back on. And let's start here. You talked about the extensions. Let's go through Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, both extension eligible this summer. You talk about how it gets dicey once those guys get paid. Is there any incentive for Bam Adebayo to wait for an extension or to take the money now How do you see that playing out? And also with Jimmy Butler, his max extension could be a pretty hefty sum as well, probably over $50 million per as well. I'm just interested to get your perspective on both of those from a timing standpoint, where you see those things kind of happening for the Heat.
So I'll start with Jimmy's first because I think it's more simple. And despite whatever, Pat Riley may have said in the media and whatever hangups about will he age well into it, I actually think it's a little less complicated because if he were to do either extension he does, it's equal money. Whether he adds the 1 year or he declines the option, adds two. It's basically 3 years, 161, both of them. So the real question is, do you want to have Jimmy for 26, 27? Because the extra money he's making, it's really not that much more than he's currently making, and the cap will go up by then. So I think with him, it's just a year by year thing. Is Jimmy still playing really well? Because no matter what, he's going to want top dollar. So I don't think, I don't know if the extension gets done now. I would guess they probably wait into next year and go from there. Maybe, he still got another year left. So, but either way, the money's not that much more. But what's really going to shake things up in their cap sheet is once Bam gets that new extension. So he can extend this summer for 3, maximum of 166 million. And he can take that. And, it's a lot. It's definitely a lot of money, but it does make sense to wait. He's been getting a lot better over the years. He's like his offensive arsenal is expanding. There's definitely a lot of I was a little surprised when he first got that max contract, and he's surpassed it. He's gone above and beyond to meet the value of it and more. So, and he's getting better. So he can wait mainly because he could still qualify for the Supermax if he wins Defensive Player of the Year. And he's gonna have some competition with Wemby, but
Yeah.
he also placed third. That's the high. I think that's the highest he ever placed for the award, right?
And the first time too that he's been all first team defense. So it does feel like there's a little bit of a groundswell, but it also feels like Wemby's going to own the next 10 years. So that's the challenge. I mean, what you mentioned though about Jimmy, that see, this is again, there's a logical way to look at this, and then there's the emotional way that I think this is ultimately going to go, and this is what the Heat have to weigh, because what you said is true. The Heat don't have to do it right now. I mean, Pat said it. I mean, first thing, they can't even do it till July 7th, but he said we don't have to do anything right now. That means this year. Okay, they could technically wait until next year to do it, but I've said that I think if they don't give him the extension, he's going to walk. He's going to opt out, and he's going to take a 3-year contract somewhere else. That this is, and I have this on pretty good authority that I'm confident that that's what people around him think he's going to do, because that's a very Jimmy Butler like thing to do. It's going to be, okay, I'll ball out for 1 year and then see ya. You didn't want to extend me then. I'm not going to extend with you now. That's the risk that they run, because otherwise I agree with you. Like, and this gets back to something we talked about with Bam, and you're getting into Bam here, but they could have waited with Bam. I mean, right? And they submarine themselves a little bit in the Giannis pursuit. I don't know that it would have happened, but it certainly made it harder because they gave Bam the extension right away. They also did the same with Tyler, and some of so. I don't know if they're going to do that with Jimmy. Certainly, the tea leaves suggested, and based on Pat's press conference, that they're not. They don't have to. But if they don't, they are taking a risk that goes beyond the financial part of this. I want to pivot a little bit on this. And again, we talk about 3 max players. Is it even feasible? Let's go macro again, NBA. Is it even feasible to have 3 maxes these days and succeed?
Well, it depends on which type, because there's 3 different. But it'll be definitely tougher for the Heat because, one, if they have Jimmy making the Supermax, and then the last point about Bam, he can take that regular max now, that's roughly 55 million a year, but if he gets Defensive Player of the Year or All NBA, now we're talking potentially 70 million a year. So that's where things really get more complicated. It's really hard to project that far out once he's actually on that next deal. What could happen? I could really only project like these next 2 years, and when you look at what Bam's making now, which is now relatively cheap, and then what Jimmy's making now, okay, that's one of the higher paid players in the league. you could fit in a Donovan Mitchell, which, yeah, he's been the player linked now to multiple teams, including the Heat, because his max isn't even, at the highest of the levels. And even when he does get that next contract next year, I looked into it. Could still work. I don't know for how long, but they could make it work for at least maybe a year or two.
That's interesting because I think everyone wants the 3-star situation to come to Miami. I've been reluctant to hope traffic anything of the sort because I think it gets difficult with the salary cap, to your point. And it's going to get difficult to the point where if Caleb Martin opts out this summer, Haywood Highsmith is a free agent, the Heat are going to have some decisions to make. And so from your perspective, forget going out and getting more talent from different teams. Can they retain their own guys in Caleb Martin and Haywood Highsmith this summer? And how do those numbers stack up from your projections? And kind of, I'm interested to hear what you think Caleb will make on the open market, because that's been a big heated topic. And just pick your brain related to those two guys, as Miami's Caleb Martin's not a free agent yet. And I know that there's some creative things they could do with sign and trades or opt in and trade to be extended. There's fun stuff, but just those guys as free agents, what do you think will happen with Miami?
So I'll just start with some rough valuations. So when looking at Caleb Martin, most of the teams that are going to go after him have the mid-level to opt for. Starts at like just under 13 mil. He can top that. They have his bird rights. So if they want to bring him back, what's something that's kind of like, okay, we beat the field, and hopefully it's something that, and hopefully there's no cap space teams that maybe offer some like crazy 2-year deals that are like front loaded. And the best comp I could think is what the Lakers gave Rui Hachimura last year. Not that they're like equal players, but both kind of in similar positions. Like fourth or fifth options for on the starting or closing lineups. They gave Rui roughly 17 mil a year. So maybe Caleb could do something like that, where it's like, a slightly higher version of that, maybe 18 mil a year for like 2-3 years. Maybe he wants to keep it short, to try to get some more money.
There's no way. There's no way, right? Like, I'm just saying, like,
I agree.
They're not doing it, right?
I agree.
They're going to say what they said about Max, right? Which is, thank you for your service. Maybe you want to come back again someday, but and we'd love to have you. You were great.
Yeah.
Had great moments in the playoffs, but more so maybe in Caleb's case than Max's. But yeah, I can't see them doing that with the second apron concerns and everything else they're dealing with, right? It's just not happening.
So I agree in the sense that if they don't like the number, they will just be like, all right, thank you, but we can probably figure something out. Thankfully, we have Jaime Jaquez. Thankfully, we have Nikola Jovic. We can probably find someone else. Like, this is what we do. We're the Heat. We find you guys, but we don't want to pay you guys after what happened in 2016 and mainly 2016. So, but I have looked into it. They could make it fit? I've looked into multiple scenarios. They could make it fit, but I would agree that ultimately, no, they just don't. They don't pay these guys. But the big difference between Caleb Martin and Max Strus and Gabe Vincent is positioning. He's definitely way more valuable to what the Heat need in the closing lineup in the playoffs. But maybe they could get someone better. Maybe if they do make some big trades, if they want to reshuffle the backcourt, for example, maybe they don't get a backcourt upgrade. Maybe they do get a different front court upgrade. I don't know what player that could be. And then for Haywood Highsmith, I could see him getting like around 8 to 9 mil a year, just like, Trey Lyles. That's something he got backup for money, like what Kenrich Williams kind of makes. And I'm just looking at the high end of what these guys could be making. Maybe they end up getting him for less. But I just kind of like to play a little higher when I'm trying to do these valuations. But the only way I guess I see these guys coming back, like if the Heat don't do anything, then let's say they can't really do any trade. They got to go back into the season with the same with Rosie or Hero backcourt. That probably means for sure Caleb Martin is not coming back. But they could probably still make it work with Highsmith around those figures I gave. But I think ideally you want to try to reshuffle the backcourt a little bit, get that money distributed where either you trade for that front court upgrade or you just save some money by trading one of those guys, and then you have more flexibility to bring back Caleb at the very worst.
So let's talk about trades. Donovan Mitchell. I said that it's going to cost Hero, Jaquez, and Nico Jovic. Ethan kind of says the lines at Nico in terms of like where the negotiation tactics come into play. I was just looking at how to make the numbers work. Do you have more creative ways to get Donovan Mitchell to Miami that I don't know about? I'm interested to hear that scenario.
So I kind of agree with that. The line that you made there. Again, that's just my opinion, but like the one thing though, like let's talk about the math first, because in my opinion, the Heat are going to have very likely a high payroll. Like even if they are able to do this trade, whatever payroll they have now, it's going to be in that similar level. But if you're going to trade for Donovan Mitchell, for example, the Heat are gonna be hard capped to the second apron, no matter what. The reason is they're not trading Jimmy Butler, they're not trading Bam Adebayo. So that means you need to trade at least one of Tyler Hero or God, I was just saying his name, Terry Rozier.
Or
Terry Rozier.
Rozier, yeah. Yeah.
And you got to add more salaries to aggregate. You got to aggregate to like match Donovan Mitchell's money, because once you aggregate, your hard cap's a second apron. But I don't think they're going to want to go past it anyway, so it's okay. But if they take back more money than they're sending out, then their hard cap's at the first apron. And I'm sure the Heat, obviously, like any other team, they don't want to spend so much money. If they can keep not being taxed that much, even be below the first apron, they do it. But I do think if you're going to have 3 max players this upcoming season, you probably need that $11 million in space between both aprons to fill out the back end of the roster, and not be total crap. So to make it work, you can do Tyler Hero, Jaquez, and Josh Richardson. Just one of those minimum guys that gets. But I put Josh Richardson specifically. I'm guessing he's going to opt in. So the money just works when you're giving out just more than Mitchell's salary. So now you can stay above the first apron. And so that's number one. But then like you're kind of the rest of the roster, now you're just trying to budget it out within the second apron. So you're just you're just getting minimum guys for the most part. You have some room. You can use the tax pyramid level, or instead, if Haywood Highsmith's market is not that high, maybe you could bring him back instead. The alternative is you're able to send out both two of basically Hero, Rozier, or Duncan Robinson. Now you're not just getting the third max player, but you're like completely reshuffling the books, because that's just a lot of money between those 3 guys. Now you can either maybe expand the deal, try to bring in an additional front court player, like I mentioned, that's not too cheap. Just an example. I'm not saying you guys have to agree with it, but like Kyle Kuzma, just because he's making the low 20s, that's someone you could that would really fit the payroll structure. But instead, they could alternatively maybe not take anyone else back, not take back that much more money, and now you could potentially instead re-sign Caleb Martin and Haywood Highsmith, and maybe do a small mid-level signing. So that's stuff I looked into today, where you can definitely, so it is possible and somewhat sustainable, at least for these next 2 years. After that, it's kind of year by year thing.
Yeah, well, Jimmy's window is not that long. So if you're deciding to work with Jimmy's window, and again, if that's the case, you probably should extend him this offseason so that the window is at least 2 years instead of 1. But that's kind of what you're dealing with. All right, when we come back, we'll get into a little bit more of this. By the way, I'm since you got 2 guys here that apparently can grow facial hair and I can't. I will say that I'm more inclined to keep Jaquez now that he has actually shaved his today, even though he looks ridiculous without it. I don't know if anybody saw him today on social media, but Jaime, just grow it back. Honestly, just grow it back. And if in Cleveland, he's going to need it because he's going to have to stay a little bit warmer. All right, but we will get to our great sponsor here. Speaking of warm, you turn the tub all the way up. Get as hot as possible and go to shoptubculture.com. Or again, you can get this for a significant other. That's what we recommend the most here. Go to shoptubculture.com. Use the code 5 FIVE For your handcrafted bath and body care, you will get again $10, excuse me, 10% off your orders of 20 or more. Free shipping is included there. They've got I don't even know if I can say this without a copyright. They've got an Eras collection on there now. Okay, for those of you, unlike my daughter, who are Swifties, you know what that is. Okay, so shoptubculture.com. I think she's going to disown me as a father for even mentioning it. Shoptubculture.com. Use the code 5 FIVE. And again, get unique products from our friends who are big Heat fans down here. Don't go to, that store in the mall that you see in every single mall. Order it online, shoptubculture.com. You will get it right away. Also, do want to mention just quickly, Prize Picks is back in the state of Florida. Use the code 5 FIVE. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. You can play it all through the Eastern Conference Finals, not just the NBA, but the NHL as well. So if you want to pair, Bob would have been a good pick on saves the other day. Okay, so check it out. Prize Picks. Use the code 5 FIVE. Play their new arena game. Set your lineup and roll with it. I can tell you, I am rolling right now on Prize Picks. I'm doing much better than I ever did with the old game. So if I can win on there, you can win on there too. Go to prizepicks.com. Make sure you use the code 5 and get that initial deposit matched up to $100. All right, so Donovan Mitchell, let's say he's not traded, because it seems to be that the momentum is moving in the direction of keeping him. I'm seeing all of these, Garland rumors and everything else. And we know the Clutch has expressed behind the scenes a desire to get Garland out of there if Mitchell's there, kind of give him his own backcourt again, because he hasn't had that since Mitchell's been there. Give me, based on what you're looking at from a cap tax, well, it's mostly tax, but cap tax situation, apron situation, like what would be a good target for the Heat this offseason? Provided, again, see that, Greg and I have gotten into a whole episode on this, that like having Hero and Rozier both making in Rozier's case 24, Tyler high 20s, like having your backcourt that you don't even know if it's going to work, making $52-53 million between them is not ideal. So what would be your if you got Jimmy and you got Bam coming back, what would you do?
I think no matter what they do, whether it's running back most of this roster or successfully getting a major upgrade like Donovan Mitchell, or not even that level, but just someone, I think they are still looking at most likely paying a pretty decent luxury tax bill and just trying to stay below the second apron. Because even if, hypothetically, Caleb Martin were to opt in, they're still, which is a cheap amount, they're still looking at being right pretty like close to second apron. Or alternatively, they re-sign Haywood Highsmith to something fair. Like no matter what, they're going to be pretty well above the first, but kind of hovering below the second. And in all those situations, they're looking at like a $30 million tax bill, which nowadays nothing. It's nothing like. It's pretty modest nowadays, given how these, how much higher it could be the deeper you are once you get above the second apron, or if you're in the repeater tax. Now, at the same time, let's say they do mostly run it back and they aren't quite playing at the level they want to be. Okay, then you could scale back a little bit. Maybe you can do some type of cost-cutting trade. I mean, that's technically what they did last year. The Kyle Lowry trade, they're making an upgrade to Terry Rozier, but they also saved a decent amount of money. So maybe there is that type of trade they could potentially do in the future if they aren't able to do something bigger in the offseason.
And just looking big picture, NBA wide, do you think that this current CBA is designed to kind of get the big threes out of the league and create parity? Like, do you see there being an environment where there no longer are three big time max salaries on rosters eventually, that they will disperse enough where there's just 2 stars per team? Like, do you see that that's where this is heading? Or do you think we'll always are going to have the big spenders that end up ponying up enough loot to bring in 3 guys of that, magnitude, as they talk about eventually with the new TV rights deal, guys making 70, 80, even eventually $100 million they could make per year. Do you think that that's going to basically eliminate the 3 superstar builds?
So 2 things. One, I mentioned earlier, it also depends on what type of max there is. The difference between what the Heat would be potentially doing this year if they had Jimmy, Bam, and Donovan Mitchell versus what the Suns are doing. The Suns have 3 players earning the highest max. These guys are making $150 million combined, which is more than the salary cap. That's unsustainable long term. The Heat, if they got Mitchell and Bam this year, both would be making the 25% max, while Jimmy's making 35. That's why they can still have a relatively deep roster while still paying like a Duncan Robinson, maybe bringing back Caleb Martin at a higher amount, and still having like a pretty solid roster all around. So, so that's like the number one, I guess. Like, what is a three? Like, how you define the three max. But then the other thing is, it just more so the new CBA I think shortens the windows, because you can have. I'm sure there still will be opportunities where a team like the Heat do this type of trade, or the Lakers or whoever, where they have three max guys, 3 stars. But now that they added the second apron, where you get these draft pick penalties in the future, like the frozen draft pick, and then if you're in it again, your draft pick will fall to the end of the first round. A lot of teams, even the high spenders, wouldn't want to deal with that. That's like that just seems like a mess. But then the other thing is the increased luxury tax payments on the higher brackets, meaning that if you are like at like 15 million ish or so above the tax going starting next season, they're increasing it, and then you happen to be in the repeater tax now, that's even higher. They're gonna make it so untenable financially that you just have to scale back. Like, I don't care what the Suns say about how much they're spending right now. Like, if they run this team back next year, once they enter the repeater tax and these tax numbers or rates are about to go up even more, they could be looking at like $500 million roster. I looked into it. Like, that's not hyperbole. They could be. It
They,
would be
they
a
better get out of the first. They better win a game in the first round, I guess, right?
yeah.
Like, if you're gonna
One
have.
hell of a first round exit, yeah.
Well, I
But
mean, there is something to be said, and trust me, Yossi, the Heat have noticed. That most of the big spending teams did not advance very far this time. I guess Boston is the one. Denver, was the other one. I guess that was in the top 8 salaries. That was in the final 8. They didn't make it. Minnesota, their costs are going to go up going forward. I mean, all these teams eventually do, but Indiana's relatively cheap by NBA standards in terms of what their payroll is right now, and Dallas is not spending crazy at the moment. So, and certainly the Heat have noticed that, and they're going to try. I mean, the second apron thing, I understand. Like, I get that. It's not about the money, because it's not my money. It's about the punitive nature of it and the lack of flexibility that they would have. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I guess the overall, just to give Heat fans something to go away with here, and make sure everybody check out Yossi's work, which is excellent. And he may have something else for you guys to pair with this. So be on the lookout. And if so, I will tweet that out. I mean, it seems to me, and Heat fans are going to hate me for saying it, that what Brady has said, essentially, our colleague Brady Hawk has said, it's not running it back, it's running it back harder, um, may ultimately be the reality for this team, because we're kind of talking about, okay, what they can do to reshape the roster, whether the hero Rozier with that kind of money, plus Duncan's money, having those 3 guys tying up all that, when you're dealing with the Jimmy and Bam situations and salaries, that really maybe even bringing the same team back, is because we're talking about possibly losing Martin and maybe Highsmith. That's going to be a challenge, actually. But yet, if the Heat did that, if they brought back Martin and Highsmith and did nothing else, Heat fans will riot. Okay, so it's like they'll only be upset if Martin and Highsmith leave, right? If they don't do anything else, if they and that's kind of where it's at. What is your most likely scenario for them, I guess?
so
What does your crystal ball say?
personally, I don't like when looking at the Donovan Mitchell stuff, and I did release a video on the Cavaliers about
Mm.
just what big changes are coming there. But I tend to agree that I think Donovan Mitchell will probably stay. I think he'll take a short-term deal, just because one, I like if you look at the Heat, the Lakers, some of these more glamorous market. I truly don't think they have enough to get Mitchell. And then if you look at the Nets, they have like all the picks they could offer. They've got some pretty good players that the Cavs could use. They could make an actual good offer, maybe the best offer. And Donovan Mitchell has interest in being in New York. But then if you're Donovan Mitchell, is that really better than staying in Cleveland? Exactly. I think I think he has a much better chance of competing, winning a title in Cleveland over the next 2 years. So, as far as what the Heat can do, if that's off the table, I guess most likely they just do a more, uh, just like something. Just I think they could still do something. I think they definitely need to split up the backcourt. I really like the Terry Rozier acquisition, but not if him and Rozier are both starting playing together, and
You,
both
you, you
make
mean him? You mean him and Hero? Basically, yeah. You don't like it, right? No, I just want to clarify, but
Terry
yes,
and Rozier.
the Terry
Yeah,
tie, the TNT backcourt. You are not a fan of that. And look, I understand it. Like we thought they needed an upgrade at point, right, Greg? We agreed on that. We both liked the Rozier move, but even Pat kind of said, well, maybe Terry could come off the bench. So it sounds like they're not convinced about it, and I get it. It's not even the offense. It's just a small backcourt for the modern NBA where you're switching everything. It's just it's a tough sell. I mean, one of them has to be a six man, and then the question is, with Tyler, there's the optics of that, and with Terry may do it, but then again, you're spending $52 million, and one of the two guys is not starting. Um,
if I'm the
I guess
Heat,
Duncan is.
yeah, if I'm the Heat, I would definitely try to trade one of them, try to get just an actual answer at the four. But I don't know, for whatever reason, the Heat just it doesn't seem like those deals really they really like go hard after them. They've been trying to get Dame and just more of backcourt upgrades. I'm guessing they most likely just, for the most part, stay the course. Martin goes, they bring back Kai Smith, that's something, and then they just find someone. And it's going to be like the most disappointing offseason, then they'll just find two guys out of nowhere, and they're amazing. And maybe whoever they draft in the number 15 is going to end up being like a huge
Like
help.
Hawkins.
It's going to work
Right.
out. I don't know how, but it's going to work out in the end.
Just run it back harder, Greg. Is that the slogan? How are we feeling about 82 games of run it back, but run it back harder?
Let's not even go there. Please. Come on. We need at least some lateral moves, some shakeups to the roster that add some size. I think that there's some things that they can do and get creative. I'm not standing for run it back harder.
We're gonna do T-shirts. We haven't done T-shirts in a long time, but I do think run it back harder backs. I like that T-shirt. The one that Greg's put up there, by Brady Hawk 305. Well, Yossi, we appreciate it. We ran it back. Second episode with you, we ran it back harder. So hopefully people enjoy the episode. Got a little bit of a better sense of it. Make sure that you follow his work. And hopefully Donovan doesn't sign that extension anytime soon, because I got to milk about 2 more months out of that before we get to all of our draft coverage in June. All right, thanks to our sponsors, shoptopculture.com. Use the code 5, prizepicks.com. Use the code 5, c-armandstaffing.com. You work in a medical office, reach out to our good friends, Nelson and his team. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.